All right, everybody, welcome to the show. I have a heavy one for you today, as per usual these days. We have every update on Israel and Gaza and much more, so we'll get to it. Israel bombing a refugee camp multiple times, the IDF casually admitting to war crimes on CNN, forced displacement plans that were just leaked, Yemen hops in the war, they declare war on Israel, Israel plays the victim at the UN. You also have the White House declaring that pro-Palestine protesters are akin to Charlottesville neo-Nazis. You remember the Jews will not replace us, guys? Well, yeah, pro-Palestine protesters are being thrown under the bus and compared to them. And then later on, when we lighten it up just a little bit, we have Ron DeSantis wearing high heels. That's fun. Okay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. And guys, please do me a big favor. If you like these segments, if you support the show, if you like these detailed breakdowns, please click subscribe. It helps tremendously in the algorithm and it doesn't cost you anything. And remember, guys, almost every segment that's done on this topic of potential World War III is getting demonetized. So if you like the show and want to support it, there's a link below for Patreon. All right, let's go ahead and dive into it. So I have some updated casualty numbers here for you. This is from the group Euromed Monitor, which is sort of like a human rights group in the region. So they have this very helpful infographic. Now, let's be clear, this came out yesterday. The numbers as of today are certainly higher. The question is how much higher? But this is what we know for sure. This is what's verified. So they say there's 9,056 people killed in Gaza. Now, underneath it, they have a more specific breakdown of like, there's this many children, this many women, and this many civilians. I haven't seen a secondary source for that, so I would take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. The top line number is correct, but the specific breakdown, I'm not as sure. But according to them, they say there's 3,718 children who have been killed, 1,929 women, and 8,198 civilians. So that's their breakdown. They say there's still about 2,000 people stuck under the rubble. Almost 22,000 people with injuries. There's 1.47 million people who are displaced. They also say 44,300 completely destroyed units. Now, the other day we talked about how, and this was last week, 42% of Gaza has been completely destroyed in this bombing campaign. My guess is that number is now over 50%. They say partially destroyed units, 136,100. And then they go on to bring up damaged press headquarters. 87 press headquarters have been bombed by the IDF. 147 schools have been damaged. 513 industrial facilities, so like factories, have been bombed. And then they even go on to give the health staff that's been targeted, 247. 107 health facilities in general have been bombed. 32 journalists have been murdered. 47 mosques have been damaged. 3 churches have been damaged, including the Orthodox church that we discussed on the show. That had to be, a week and a half ago now? So these are some absolutely devastating numbers, and it's only getting worse. So then we move on to this here. The big news, which broke last night and this morning, is that a refugee camp was bombed. And so I'm going to play a little bit here. This is from Al Jazeera. They have camera crews on the ground, and you can see the remnants of the devastation.
What you are watching are live pictures coming from our Al Jazeera correspondent camera crew in Jabalia refugee camp in central Gaza City. Anas Sharif there, our correspondent, describing the scene to us as Israeli bombs or missiles.
For everybody just listening to this, it says at least 100 Palestinians killed and hundreds injured in the Jabalia camp attack in North Gaza.
A very heavily, densely populated area very close to the Indonesian hospital. This happened within the last hour. At the moment, it's been confirmed that at least 100 have been killed, as many as 300 injured. But as you can see from the scenes, there are still many being pulled from the rubble, from the debris. The community at large has rushed to the area to try and help and bring the injured to hospital. It is a scene of utter carnage.
So this is dark. Now I want to show you an IDF spokesperson goes on CNN to talk about this, and this is an astonishing admission. Listen to this.
I want to ask you first about this massive blast that we all just saw. We saw the video at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Is there anything more you can first of all tell us about how this explosion happened?
Hi, Wolf. Thanks for having me. So we'll be coming out in the next, hopefully, hour with more data, but I can update you now that there was a very senior Hamas commander in that area. Sadly, he was hiding, again, as they do, behind within civilians. And that's all I can say at this point. We're looking into it, and we'll be coming out with more data as we learn what happened there.
So can you confirm it was an Israeli attack that destroyed a big chunk of that Jabalia refugee camp?
Yes, I can. We were focused again on a target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know...
You know you've gone way too far when even the emotionless robot Wolf Blitzer is just dumbfounded by your bombing campaign. He's like, wait, I don't understand. I've been told the Israelis are the good guys my entire life, and you guys just bombed a refugee camp. According to them, to get one Hamas commander. One. The initial numbers were over 100 dead. That will probably go up with time. To get one Hamas commander. And they say, that's the tragedy of war. What do you want me to tell you? Look, this really rips the mask off of the thinnest and flimsiest excuse of all time, which is human shields, bro. They got human shields. Think about the human shields argument in any other context. Even if it's true, if somebody was holding a gun to your kid's head in their school, would the local police department blow up the entire school with 85 other kids inside? And would they say, hey, don't blame me, blame that guy, because he had a gun up to the kid's head, so we had to take him out? No, everybody realizes that's preposterous. If you kill 85 kids to save the one kid, that's not the way you go about it. Unless, of course, you simply do not care about the kid or kids in the same way they do not care about Palestinians. They don't care at all. If that was Israelis, they never would have dropped that bomb. But since it's Palestinians, they're like, go ahead. We don't care that they're innocent. That doesn't matter to us in the slightest. So even CNN is astonished by the barbarity of the IDF in this instance. Okay, more for you. Look at this, guys. I woke up this morning. This is the first thing I see. Breaking. Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp struck again a day after Israeli air attack killed dozens. So they bombed the refugee camp, killed at least 100 people, civilians. There was massive international outcry. Then the next day, they do it again. By the way, why? Why'd they do it again? Because they know they can get away with it. Because the people that actually matter in this conflict, the US government enablers, have given them a wink and a nod and said, look, there's nothing we're going to do to really stop you. All right. Look at this. This, warning here, this is a hard to watch video, but this is a Palestinian man in Gaza breaking down as he realizes that 3 of his children were killed in the Israeli airstrike that we just discussed on the Jabalia refugee camp. Again, warning, but watch this.
واحد الله جبل خلاص حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل هذا صديقي جابر حميد يفقد عائلته الآن حسبي الله ونعم حسبي الله.
What is there to say about that? I think it speaks for itself. Now, at the same time, you have all those things I just showed you. Look at what the commentary on the right is like in the US. Glenn Beck, well-known right-wing commentator. This is astonishing. This is after a bombing campaign that killed over 9,000 people. Watch this.
I don't know why I was born, but there is something about the state of Israel that connects deeply to me. To have the privilege to stand with the Jew is a tremendous honor, spiritually. So I want to read a letter that I wrote that I am sending to the state of Israel. To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the honorable officials at the state of Israel. In this moment, I have chosen to ask you for citizenship in the state of Israel. I have nothing to offer but my voice of support. And some might say that my support might be more valuable as an independent voice. Perhaps they're correct. But my request for citizenship is not about words, it is about deeds. Why, one might wonder, would I want to embrace a heritage and identity that is so ruthlessly hunted down again and again? Yet it is precisely during such moments that we must choose to stand. I anticipate no privileges or exemption from the state of Israel. I instead yearn to align myself with those willing to rise, to fight, and sacrifice for the fundamental right to live. Is this not what both Israel and America embody? In closing, my desire for dual citizenship does not stem from any expectation of gain, but from a deep-rooted belief in standing with what is right and true. 10 years ago, I took my children to Israel for the first time, but we first visited Auschwitz in Poland. I told them, you cannot understand Israel without the Bible or Auschwitz. May Israel remain an eternal flame of hope, a beacon of resilience, and a testament to the enduring human spirit.
So what do you have? Fawning adoration sprinkled in with a victim complex narrative. This is the stuff the right is saying in the US as civilians are being slaughtered left and right. By the way, I'm not letting the liberals off the hook. I'll tell you what liberals and Democrats are saying in just a second. In fact, it might be the next tab. It is. This is Elizabeth Warren responding to the fact that that refugee camp was just bombed. Look at what she says. Horrible. Israel has an obligation to protect civilians under the laws of war. Hamas's use of innocent Palestinians as human shields does not excuse bombing a location filled with civilians. Now look, people who are not that politically astute might look at this and say, "What? I don't see the problem with this, Kyle. What's the matter with this?" Let me explain it very simply. This is the reaction no matter what Israel does. Israel? Tut tut, you should follow the laws of war. You should believe in human rights. You need to be more targeted in your bombing campaign. That's always the reaction. Instead of saying the words, ceasefire now. Instead of saying, you know what? I'm going to vote against that package that gives $14 billion more to Israel and arms them to the teeth again. So in other words, no material policy change despite the slaughter of civilians. It's just finger-wagging tut-tut. That's all it is. As they actually sign off what's going on. I'm expressing disapproval. How quickly would you like your next $14 billion? I'm really against this, even though I'm not for a ceasefire. It's such chicken shit, man. This is horrendous. All right. Now we have Netanyahu. He's been giving the most deranged press conferences I've ever seen in my life. And listen to this one.
I want to make clear Israel's position regarding a ceasefire. Just as the United States would not agree to a ceasefire after the bombing of Pearl Harbor or after the terrorist attack of 9/11, Israel will not agree to a cessation of hostilities with Hamas after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
It's not Hamas. You're not bombing Hamas. It's that simple. Everybody knows the top Hamas officials are in Qatar. If you really want to get Hamas, pay off the Qatari government, go arrest the Hamas officials, and bring them to the International Criminal Court. Or pay off the Qatari officials and go murk them. Send some special ops, put a bullet right between the eyes. I'd rather have 7 dead top Hamas officials than 9,000 dead innocent Gazans. God, this is all so disingenuous. We know what their actual goal is. We know what their actual goal is. It is ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, and we're watching it unfold right in front of our eyes.
Calls for a ceasefire are calls for Israel to surrender to Hamas, to surrender to terrorism.
It's obviously calls for you to stop massacring civilians. Guys, as of a week ago, when we had still like 7,000 people dead, the official number of proven Hamas militants who were killed, 13. 62% of the dead are innocent women and children, never mind innocent men as well. When you include them, it's over 90%. And he's out there. This is a total straw man argument against people who are calling for a ceasefire. Total straw man. Oh, you just want Hamas to defeat us, bro. It's so... they're not even trying. It reminds me of 2003 when the U.S. invaded Iraq, and when people were dissenting, the line against them would be, you're just a Saddam Hussein apologist. Are you saying Saddam is not a dictator? Are you saying he's not bad? Are you saying he hasn't, killed civilians on his own? No, we're just saying the U.S. shouldn't go to war against Saddam Hussein. And guess what? We were right. We were proven right. And now it's the same thing. You're just a Hamas apologist. Jesus Christ.
To barbarism. That will not happen. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible says that there is a time for peace and a time for war. This is a time for war. A war.
Notice something interesting. In all of these press conferences, he cites the Bible. He doesn't say the Torah. He says the Bible. Why? Because he knows where his bread is buttered. He knows he's dependent on Joe Biden and the U.S. government to facilitate his ongoing slaughter. So he cites the Bible to get right-wing Christians and Americans on his side. That's the whole point.
Our common future. Today, we draw a line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. It is a time for everyone to decide where they stand. Israel will stand against the forces of barbarism until victory.
We're standing against the forces of barbarism by bombing refugee camps and slaughtering civilians, bombing schools, mosques, hospitals, apartment buildings, innocent people fleeing from North Gaza to South Gaza, which is what you told them to do, cutting off food, fuel, water, power to over 2 million people, doing collective punishment. We are fighting barbarism by doing barbarism.
I hope and pray that civilized nations everywhere will back this fight. Because Israel's fight is your fight. Because if Hamas and Iran's axis of evil win, you will be their next target. That's why Israel's victory will be your victory. But make no mistake, regardless of who stands with Israel, Israel will fight until this battle is won, and Israel will prevail. May God bless Israel, and may God bless all those who stand with Israel.
I got more from him. He gets asked a question about civilian casualties. Look at how he responds.
People can't understand why so many civilians have to die in this process. You argue that Hamas is putting them up as human shields. Is that a good enough excuse? Are you inflicting here collective punishment on the people of Palestine?
Not a single civilian has to die. Hamas merely has to let them go to the safe zone that we created in southeastern Gaza Strip. There's a safe zone there.
That's not true. They've been bombing South Gaza. They said go to South Gaza, then they kept bombing South Gaza. That's a fact.
Not a single civilian has to die. But Hamas is preventing them from leaving, keeping them in the areas of conflict. So I think that you should direct your questions to Hamas. But I can tell you one thing. We're going out of our way to prevent civilian casualties.
That line is the biggest load of horseshit I've ever heard in my life. By the way, the trick that he's doing right here is literally the same trick Hamas does. When Hamas kills innocent Israeli civilians, they say, well, what do you want me to do? It's the Jews. It's the Israelis, it's the Jews. You can't blame me for it. And he's doing the same thing. So when Israel murks civilians on purpose, it's, you can't blame me for it, it's Hamas. Hamas made me do it. God, man, you gotta stop with the collective punishment. Everybody has agency. Everybody's responsible for what they do. This is crazy. All right, I got more for you. This is in WikiLeaks. Verified document from Israeli Minister of Intelligence on October 13th suggests forced displacement of Gaza civilians to Egypt would, quote, yield positive and long-term strategic results. The advisory document envisions a three-stage process, including the establishment of tent cities in Sinai and opening of humanitarian corridor, followed by construction of cities in northern Sinai from which there would be no return to Gaza. So in other words, ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, and it's on paper. This is what they want. By the way, since this came out, the Israeli government came out and verified its legitimacy. That's their plan. They're not hiding their plan. All right. Here we go. Israeli defense minister.
This machine cannot be stopped. These are strong forces with determined soldiers, and I am convinced that they will be able to fulfill their missions. As far as I'm concerned, the Hamas terrorists only have two possibilities: either to die fighting the IDF or to surrender with no terms. There's no third possibility.
So understand something, guys. This is setting up a justification for an endless war or bombing campaign. That's the whole purpose of this. Because you're never going to, what does that even mean? Every single Hamas member needs to surrender or be killed? How on earth would you know if you got every single Hamas member? And by the way, you're creating more Hamas by the day. Every time you murder innocent Palestinian civilians, you just create more Hamas. Because now these people have nothing to live for, and their whole life's goal is going to be revenge and retribution and retaliation. And that's exactly what Israel did. This is the cycle of violence we talk about. This is exactly what Israel's doing in response to the October 7th terror attack. They're doing revenge and retaliation and retribution, and they don't care who they're killing. So extreme right-wing violence breeds extreme right-wing violence in the other direction. That's what's going to happen. That's always what happens. And so this is just a justification to never stop war, to never stop bombing. This is like when the U.S. decided we're going to wage a war on terror. What does that even mean? How are you going to determine we've defeated terror? Terror is a tactic, right? Hamas is a group. It's fluid. It's not stagnant. There's going to be more people joining. You kill people and then more people are going to join. That's what's going to happen. That's like saying we're going to wage a war on murder. We're going to wage a war on rape. Are you ever going to eliminate rape or murder? No. Are you ever going to eliminate terrorism? No. Are you ever going to be able to eliminate Hamas? No. It's not going to happen. Especially since you're creating more and more of them. All right. Look at this, guys. Bolivia severs ties. Hey, what happened? What happened? Oh, there it is. Okay. This is in Reuters. Bolivia severs ties with Israel. Others recall envoys over Gaza. Bolivia said on Tuesday it had broken diplomatic ties with Israel because of its attack on the Gaza Strip, while neighbors Colombia and Chile recalled their ambassadors to the Middle Eastern countries for consultations. The three South American nations lambasted Israel's attacks on Gaza and condemned the deaths of Palestinian citizens. Bolivia, quote, decided to break diplomatic relations with the Israeli state in repudiation and condemnation of the aggressive and disproportionate Israeli military offensive taking place in the Gaza Strip, Deputy Foreign Minister Freddie Mamani said at a press conference. So, look, I expect this stuff to continue because Israel had the goodwill of the entire world after October 7th because there was a Hamas terror attack against innocent Israeli civilians. So everybody was standing with Israel in that moment. Every reasonable person, every country. But then when your response is, we're going to kill 5 times as many civilians on your side on purpose, and as we're doing that, still play the victim right now, well, of course you're going to lose the goodwill of the world, and that's exactly what happened. So we also have this. This is something. The Ayatollah in Iran urges Muslim countries to boycott Israel. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called on Muslim states to cease oil and food exports to Israel, demanding an end to its bombardment of the Gaza Strip, state media reported. The bombings on Gaza must stop immediately. The path of oil and food exports to the Zionist regime should be stopped. Khamenei told a group of students in Tehran, according to Iranian state media. Israel has vowed to wipe out Tehran-backed Hamas, which rules Gaza in retaliation for the October 7th attack, where 1,400 Israelis were killed. So, look, you might look at this and say, okay, wait, is that an overreaction? But when I look at this, my immediate thought is, okay, well, if he's just calling for an economic response to Israel, then maybe they're not going to hop in militarily, right? The thing that everybody should fear, on top of just the wanton, brutal destruction of civilians and killing of innocent people, is that this spirals out of control in the sense that Hezbollah jumps in more directly. The U.S. also jumps in to go after Hezbollah for Israel. You have Iran, they jump in, potentially, Shia forces in Syria jump in, and, you're off to the races. At what point does China get in one way or another, or Russia get in one way or another? Where do countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia stand, who are big U.S. allies, but who have expressed extreme disapproval of what Israel is doing? So if the response is just economic, well, that, number one, it's like we dodged a bullet. And number two, it might have some impact in a positive direction in the sense that it gets Israel to stop massacring civilians. I mean, we saw this with apartheid South Africa. As soon as the world turned on apartheid South Africa and economically we're not having it anymore, well, that's when you started to see some real change. So he's just calling for it. Are people going to follow through with it? The only indication we have at the moment is that some countries are severing ties with Israel as we speak. Okay, more. So as all this is going on, here we have the Hamas official who we discussed the other day. This guy ran out of an interview with BBC over the world's most obvious questions. Now we have a situation where he's on, I think this is Iranian TV. I know Memory is Iranian, but this says just translated by Memory. I don't know if that's the actual network that it is. Anyway, he goes on TV and he says the following. Here, I'll mute it. I'll mute it and I'll read it to you because we don't speak the language. Okay. Israel is a country that has no place on our land. We must remove that country because it constitutes a security, military, and political catastrophe. Did I speed this up? No, I didn't. Okay. To the Arab and Islamic nation and must be finished. We are not ashamed to say this with full force. We must teach Israel a lesson, and we will do this again and again. The Al-Aqsa flood is just the first time, and there will be a second, a third, a fourth, because we have the determination, the resolve, and the capabilities to fight. Will we have to pay a price? Yes, and we are ready to pay it. We are called a nation of martyrs, and since we are proud to sacrifice our martyrs. We did not want to harm civilians. But there were complications on the ground, and there was a party in the area with civilian population. It was a large area across 40 kilometers. The occupation must come to an end. Occupation where? In the Gaza Strip? No, I'm talking about all Palestinian lands. Does that mean an annihilation of Israel? Yes, of course. The existence of Israel is illogical. The existence of Israel is what causes all that pain, blood, and tears. It is Israel, not us. We are the victims of occupation, period. Therefore, nobody should blame us for the things we do. On October 7th, October 10th, everything we do is justified. So this is literally zero remorse about Hamas massacring innocent Israeli civilians. And he's saying, we're victims by definition, so nothing we do can be condemned. But that is literally the same argument Israel uses. After the Holocaust, they're like, look, we are the world's most historic victims, so now we are defining ourselves as victims, so anything we do that is offensive and aggressive, it doesn't count as offensive and aggressive, it is defensive because we are the victims, and we've already declared us as such. That's their argument. You're just copying their argument. And with this logic, you can always justify atrocities. You can always justify the worst imaginable things. And that's what he says. Look, we're not done. What we did on October 7th, we do it again. Well, now you also know that what happened on October 7th, look at everything it's led to. But he has a reaction to that too. He's like, hey, we're martyrs. We're happy to die for our cause. Really? You want to talk to a Palestinian mother who lost her baby and see if she agrees with that? My guess is she'd say, for the love of God, we need to find a way to get a peaceful resolution, bring about our own liberation, our own freedom. But I don't want any more innocent people dying. So he is 100% unapologetic about October 7th. He says he'd do it again. He says all the civilians that are dying are worth it. And he says nothing we do can ever be considered wrong. So you have real mirror images with how Likud and the IDF and Netanyahu are talking about this and how Hamas is talking about this. And that's devastating. And don't get it twisted. I'm not saying the power dynamic is equal. It most certainly is not. Israel is occupying Palestinian land. Israel is doing apartheid against Palestinians. You have the illegal ultra-Orthodox settlers stealing land relentlessly in the West Bank. So it's not, there's an asymmetry here, right? The power is not even, but the ideological commitments are actually the same in the sense that it's no compromise, no negotiation, nothing we ever do can be considered wrong. We're happy to have all these innocents die for the cause. It's just, you're never going to get anywhere with this. So, by the way, world's worst spokesperson. I mean, this guy running out of tough interviews, and then when you give him the floor to say whatever he wants, he's just as loathsome as you would expect. All right, let's continue here. So even the Financial Times editorial board, which is generally considered a right-leaning outlet, kind of like the Wall Street Journal, they come out and say, we need a ceasefire. Quote, Israel's collective punishment of the 2.3 million people trapped in Gaza, almost half of them, must stop. So here's, we already went over what right-wing commentators are saying, what Democratic politicians like Elizabeth Warren are saying. Look at what Republican politicians are saying. This is really something. So this is going to be J.D. Vance on Face the Nation, and he says something astonishing here.
Why don't you think the United States can do what Leader McConnell talked about there and provide aid to them?
Well, first, Leader McConnell is right, of course, that there are a lot of innocent people in Gaza. We certainly don't want to cause any harm to them. We also have to be, again, reasonable about what we can accomplish. Who delivers the humanitarian assistance? Fundamentally, Hamas is in control of the entire territory. So if you deliver a large amount of humanitarian assistance, who's it going to go to? The children in Gaza or to the Hamas fighters on the front line? I fear it's going to go to Hamas.
The Red Cross, all the international organizations who have been there and administering and, frankly, stepping up because the government has failed the Palestinian people, in the words of a lot of analysts on both sides of the aisle.
Stepping up, but I think there's still a lot of evidence with a lot of these international organizations that when we send aid into Gaza, a lot of it goes into the wrong hands. And that's what those of us who are critical of the president's posture are really worrying about. We don't want to basically fund two sides of the exact same conflict. Fund Hamas, fund Israel. Seems like a really bad deal for American taxpayers. Most of all, it's just stupid.
Well, it's not aid to Hamas. It's aid to the Palestinian people.
Sure, and look,
a million of which are children.
And if I could wave a magic wand and give aid to the Palestinian children, I will. But given the realities on the ground, I think if we divert resources to Gaza, it's going to fall in the wrong hands.
So you don't trust any of the international organizations that are doing that right now?
I don't trust Hamas on the ground, and I certainly think the international organizations, look, some of them are good people, some of them actually have some compromised positions. We can't assume that just because it flows to an international organization, it's going to go to the kids and not to the fighters.
You've been very...
So just starve, go thirsty, die. I mean, that's the logical consequence of what he's saying. No aid on the ground? Yeah, just die. We don't care. He's not pushing Israel to turn the power back on or get any clean water in there. He's against any sort of humanitarian assistance. He's not against the bombing campaign. So look at the spectrum of debate that's allowed among official people in the United States of America. You have the Democratic position, which is bomb nicer. That's the position. Let's do a humanitarian pause. Pause means you're going to go back to bombing. That's what a pause is. It's not permanently stopping it, it's pause it. So stop the bombing for a little bit, give them water and food on the one hand, and then go back to bombing. But make sure when you bomb very humanitarianly. Make sure you keep it within the laws and rules of war, even though they're not doing that, and they've shown no intention of doing that. Do that, please. So the Democratic position is bomb nicer. The Republican position is bomb as mean as possible and also starve and go thirsty and die. He's saying no humanitarian assistance in the midst of this. None. Because something Hamas. That's the spectrum among politicians in the United States of America with, I want to say, anywhere between 10 and 20 exceptions. It's overwhelmingly the left flank of the Democratic Party, people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush, and then also throw in Thomas Massie there for different reasons because he's a libertarian and he just doesn't want to, like arm any foreign nation because he wants to focus here at home and he wants a very non-interventionist foreign policy and even isolationist foreign policy. But this is the spectrum of the debate that's allowed. Man, this is somehow, I don't even know how it's possible, but we've now surpassed the brutality of the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the war on terror era. Like, we've surpassed that because in such a short time frame, you have all of this death and destruction, and it's being actively cheered on by virtually everybody. So there's a director of the New York office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, and he stepped down over what Israel is doing. And he is furious about this. So here's a quote from his piece. I worked in these halls through the genocides against the Tutsis, Bosnian Muslims, the Yazidi, and the Rohingya. Gaza is a textbook case of genocide. So you have some people with a conscience who cannot stand by while this happens. Remember that guy who stepped down from the U.S. State Department because in the midst of Israel slaughtering innocent civilians, they were rushing through more military aid to Israel. And according to him, this guy who resigned from the State Department, he says there are no checks and balances when it comes to Israel. With everybody else, with every other country, my job is to try to make sure the weapons get in the right hands, try to have an official line of communication where you at least attempt to make it a more humanitarian mission. But with Israel, they say, shut up, don't question anything, send them the weapons, you're done here. And he resigned. He said, I can't do this. So there's also a conservative MP, Paul Bristow, and this is, of course, in the UK, and he was sacked from his government post after calling for a ceasefire. Just so you understand how bloodthirsty and insane and absurd everything is right now, just calling for a ceasefire got him sacked from his position. Now, this is a devastating poll to share with you guys. Look at this. According to the Israel Democracy Institute, 83.4% of Israeli Jews don't think that Israel should take into consideration the suffering of the civilian population in Gaza. 83.4%. This is just amazing to me. This proves that there's been a complete and total dehumanization of Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims. That's what this says to me. Because the exact same pain that Israelis felt on October 7th, when innocent people were killed, and you have family members of those innocent people who watched all this unfold, that exact same pain and deep hurt and suffering is what people on the Palestinian side feel when a baby gets their head exploded by an IDF bomb dropped from the sky when they're in a refugee camp. That's the same pain. You're all human. But they say, no, we don't care about the Palestinian civilians. Whew. Again, to show you how far we've fallen on this issue, Ronald Reagan, in the 1980s, when Israel was bombing Lebanon relentlessly, Ronald Reagan made a phone call to the Israeli prime minister and said, this is a genocide and you're going to stop this right now. You know what happened? He called back a couple hours later and said, okay, we stopped the bombing. When George H.W. Bush was president, he said, I'll give you a $10 billion loan guarantee if and only if you freeze settlement expansion. You know what happened? Israel froze settlement expansion. So there's two examples of standing up to the Israeli government and making them fall in line and be more humanitarian. Well, even under George W. Bush, look at this. In 2002, George Bush strongly denounced Israel for killing Hamas' top militant leader because 7 kids were killed in the same strike. 7 kids. Today, Israel killed and wounded 400 Gazans in Jabalia refugee camp to allegedly kill a single Hamas platoon commander. Not a single word from the US and the EU. So again, to show you how far we've fallen, even George W. Bush was like, okay, you got a Hamas guy, but you killed 7 children. No, I'm denouncing that. Now, barely a peep. And certainly no consequences for targeting a refugee camp multiple times to get one Hamas leader. It's amazing, man. Look, I said it before, I'll say it one more time here. We know the Hamas leaders are actually in Qatar. Pay off the Qatari government. Go take them off there, right? Go take them down there. Instead of doing that, they're just leveling civilian populations all throughout Gaza. All right, so this is really interesting from Ryan Grimm in The Intercept. How reliable is the Gaza Ministry of Health's list of those killed in the bombing campaign and siege? We compared a list of 46 people known to have been killed and found 43 on the list. Despite its links to Hamas, if anything, the list undercounts. So this is a direct rebuke of what Biden said the other day when he's like, I don't trust those numbers. I don't trust the numbers that they're giving. He's just trying to muddy the waters to buy time to let Israel continue to do its slaughter. Say, hey, fog of war, a lot of stuff going on. We don't think those numbers are real. We think they're overstating it. Well, look, in previous fights, the numbers were relatively accurate. We know from 2014, Operation Protective Edge. This is a fact. And so there's no reason to doubt the numbers now. Even if you do doubt the numbers and cut them in half, the numbers are still atrocious. You're still looking at 4,000, 5,000 dead. 1,500, 2,000 children. Like, this is what you're looking at. And they decided, well, let's actually dig into this, and come to find out, of course, the numbers are reliable. You want to know why? Because a career bureaucrat in a hospital in Gaza is not the same as a Hamas militant with a machine gun gunning down innocent Israeli civilians. That's obvious. You'd have to be a tried and true, dyed-in-the-wool bigot to just assume that some bureaucrat who works in a hospital or some surgeon or doctor is the same as some Hamas militant who's gunning down innocent civilians. Look at this. Israel denied Rolling Stone press credentials after their critical coverage of Netanyahu and the widening conflict. Just flat out authoritarian stuff here. Oh, you criticized us? Sorry, we're revoking your press credentials. So, no free speech, no free expression, no free press, no First Amendment. We do what we want. We're authoritarian. All right. Klippenstein says the following. The first national poll of Arab Americans since the war in Gaza began shows how deep the sense of betrayal goes, with only 17% of Arab American voters saying they will vote for Biden in 2024. That's a drop from 59% in 2020. The source's time here. So it was 59%, I'll vote for Biden. Now it's down to 17%. By the way, I read some articles on this. The quotes are devastating. The quotes are devastating. They're basically like, there's nothing he could do now to get me to support him because he's facilitating a genocide, and I can't overlook that. So not only is what Biden's doing immoral and unethical and wrong in principle, it's also electorally idiotic. Well done, guys. Well done. So what's the Republican response to all this? Well, a couple days ago, they released an Israel-only aid package. But how do they fund it? Well, they offset $14.3 billion in aid by cutting funding for the IRS when they go after uber-wealthy tax cheats. So in other words, they're like, let's let uber-wealthy tax cheats get away with paying next to no taxes or no taxes. Let's take the funding of the cuts from the IRS and use that to give Israel more weapons for them to do their slaughter of innocent people. Now, thankfully, the Democrats have said this is dead on arrival. None of us are voting for it. But can you imagine how astonishing this is? So they managed to mix together class war. They're on the side of the rich against everybody else. They mix that together with pro-genocide, let's arm the people slaughtering babies. That's great. Good stuff. All right. Trump came out and vowed to deport residents who participate in pro-Palestine protests and reinstate his Muslim travel ban. So you're seeing a lot of this from all across the political spectrum. There's a conflation of pro-Palestine protests with, oh, you guys just all love Hamas. You guys are pro-terrorist. And they're trying to use the force of law to crack down on these people. They don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in the First Amendment. And they're smearing them relentlessly. And Trump, of course, as always, goes a step further. He wants to deport residents who participate in pro-Palestine protests. Then we got Hillary. This clip came out the other day. I'm sure many of you have seen it by now, but she's same as she ever was, man. Same as she ever was.
People who are calling for a ceasefire now do not understand Hamas. That is not possible. It would be such a gift to Hamas because they would spend whatever time there was a ceasefire in effect rebuilding their armaments, creating stronger positions to be able to fend off an eventual assault by the Israelis. So we're in a very different world. I don't think it had to be the world we're in, but that's where we are, and we've got to figure our way forward through it.
All right, let's be clear. The ceasefire is not about Hamas. The ceasefire is, holy shit, you're killing over 90% civilians. Stop massacring civilians. That is terrorism, and you're doing it on purpose. So that's why it's ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Oh my God, you just killed a baby. Oh my God, you just killed a grandma. Oh my God, you just leveled a refugee camp. Oh my God, you just bombed an apartment building. Like, this is why people are saying ceasefire. Stop massacring innocent people. Nobody's saying ceasefire because it's like, gosh golly, you're killing too many Hamas terrorists and we're against that. Literally nobody is saying that. But Hillary's showing she's the same as she ever was. All right, final one here for you. Lindsey Graham went on TV. He called the UN, quote, the most anti-Semitic body on the planet. Why? Because the General Assembly voted for a ceasefire. So because the UN wants Israel to stop killing civilians, they are anti-Semitic. absolutely beyond parody. The hysteria and the mania shooting through the country right now is astonishing. It's next level. It's like post 9/11, except maybe even crazier and worse, if that's possible. This is where we are, and it's devastating. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.